Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Skies of Ace Combat. Today I'm going to be covering the F-15 Eagle. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and how you all been doing? Hopefully you all been enjoying these videos, just covering some information about the planes that I'm featuring and featuring some gameplay from Ace Combat 7. Let's begin with the Strike Eagle. The F-15E Strike Eagle is a multi-role strike fighter that is a variation of the F-15 Eagle. Now, if I'm here saying F-15, I do mean just the F-15 Eagle. It could be an A or a C or whatever, but if I'm referring at all to the F-15 Eagle, I will say F-15E. The big E. The Strike Eagle was developed with the Strike Eagle was developed with long-range interdiction in mind when it was developed. The F-15E was developed to replace the General Dynamics F-111 Aardvark, which you can see here. This was actually a plane that was in service in Vietnam. And any remaining F-4s that were still in service that the F-15 itself did not already replace. That being said, McDonnell Douglas would begin working on this Strike Eagle project despite there being no official interest in the project at the time. They kind of had an advantage here with this because they actually started this project before there was even an order for a plane or even requirements set up. You could say they were a bit proactive with the Strike Eagle project. In March of 1981, the United States Air Force announced the Enhanced Tactical Fighter Program. The goal of the program was to find a replacement for the F-111. See how that works out? They kind of got a head start on it, and they just kind of knew that this was going to be coming. And that being said, at the time, it wasn't like they had insider information or anything like that. You could kind of see the writing on the wall that a lot of the Vietnam era planes were getting replaced. That they had already been in, some of them had already been in service at this point for 20 years. Some of them even longer. So the writing was on the wall. Now, General Dynamics would submit the F-16XL, which you can actually, it is a playable plane in Ace Combat. McDonnell Douglas would submit the F-15E, and Panava would submit the Tornado. However, unfortunately, the Tornado really wasn't being seriously considered, and what that had to do with is because it was not an American-made plane, not an American-built plane, and it kind of lacked the air superiority capabilities of, say, the F-15E had. On February 24th of 1984, literally just a few months before I was born, the F-15 was selected for service. Development would continue and production started in July of 1985. Hey, that's not cool. I'm older than this plane. Like, the first F-15 would take its maiden flight December 11th, 1986. The first batch of F-15Es would arrive at Luke Air Force Base in April of 1988. So, I don't know, I feel bad now because like this plane's I've been around for a while, so this plane's been around for a while. The prototype of the F-15E was based on a two-seat version of the F-15B. That being said, the prototype would have some structural changes as well as a more powerful engine installed. The back seat was also set up for a weapons systems officer, a WISO, and it was up to the WISO to work the air-to-ground systems of the F-15E, while the F-15E was focused on while the F-15 is focused on doing groundwork, it also does have air-to-air capabilities. So it's actually a quite capable multi-role fighter. It can be armed with AIM-9 Sidewinders and AIM-120 AMRAAMs, and typically that's what it's armed with for air-to-air capabilities, as it does actually retain its counter-air capabilities of the F-15A. Now that's probably been upgraded a bit. I'm sure it has been. I'm only focused on the E. I'm not focused on any of the more modern variants of the F-15E itself. Now, the F-15E would see extensive combat in Desert Storm alongside the F-15, the F-16, and other fighters of the time. The primary target was Iraqi Scud launchers. The F-15E was also instrumental during the attack on Tully Air Base, where the F-15E used GBU-12s and CBU-87s to attack the airfield. They would actually successfully destroy a total of 18 Iraqi jets. There was actually huge news coverage about this raid. I actually remember this air raid being on the news when I was a kid. I'd come home from school and I'd actually watch, updates on Desert Storm, on the war. And that was huge headlines when it happened. I don't know if it'd be so huge nowadays, because honestly, it was, when you really think about it now, it's the Iraqis, those Iraqi fighters just didn't stand a chance. Those planes were able to sneak in under the radar, go unspotted, and get in there and pretty much completely demolish an airfield without anybody even knowing until it was happening already. So, I mean, that just shows the capabilities of not just the plane, but also the capabilities of the United States Air Force, how capable just United States pilots are in general. It would also conduct operations during the Balkans War and operations during Operation Enduring Freedom. The F-15E is armed with a 20mm M60A1 Vulcan cannon with 500 rounds. The F-15E also has 4 pylons that can mount missiles. You can also mount fuel tanks to them. It can mount up to also 2,300 pounds of bombs on its CFTs. If I understand it correctly, they're kind of like pylons, but they're not true pylons. They're meant directly just for bombs, if I understand it correctly. So, all in all, I think it's actually a pretty interesting plane. The F-15E is also powered by 2 Pratt & Whitney F-100 PW200 engines. Now, these are very similar to the engines that they have in the standard F-15E, but I believe these engines are a little bit more beefed up. And that was so it could keep up its speed and endurance, because the fact is the F-15E is a bigger plane, and it's designed to carry a heavier load into combat. And yeah, I mean, but that being said, it's quite good at what it does, for what I understand. And honestly, at the end of the day, if the information is correct, the F-15E can carry more ordnance on it than the B-17 of World War II. And the B-17 was no slouch in the time for ordnance. It couldn't carry that plane, the B-17, could not carry the most ordnance of all the planes in the United States arsenal, but it could still carry a lot of ordnance. And like I said, from what I understand, the F-15E can actually carry quite a bit more, and it is a quite devastating plane. And honestly, from what I can tell, even though there's other planes that's replacing, like F-16s and the F-15s, it doesn't seem like we're actually going to be retiring the F-15Es anytime soon. It doesn't seem like there's any plane that can take over its role. And actually, the Air Force has been working on tactics and strategies where F-22s would actually be used as like an advanced vanguard, find targets for F-15Es, and then the F-15Es would use long-range missiles and pre-designate targets for bombs, fly in and do its job, and fly out. So it sounds like that they're able to make it so this plane can even be more effective and can be effective for a long time to come, because essentially they're removing the threat that the plane can receive by how they're using it. At least that's how I understand it when I was reading the information. But anyway, folks, there you go. That's the F-15E. Check out my previous video on the F-15C. And, well, honestly, at this point, you can check out any of my previous videos. I got quite a few of them up. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. Hopefully you all learned something new about the F-15E Strike Eagle. Thank you very much for tuning in, and have yourself a wonderful day.